Hi, welcome to Maverick Mindcast. I'm here with Sean Stone. Welcome, Sean. I'll just give you a brief intro. Sean's a filmmaker, a media host, an author, an actor, a poet, a speaker. He's also a truth seeker, which I really adore him for, and a spiritual activist. Welcome, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I realized I just learned that we are neighbors here in Florida, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, you never know. I might come visit you one day and
Sure.
interview you again. So I wonder, how did you, first of all, I know most recently you have a series called The Biggest Secret. It's on Iconic, and where else, on Vimeo, or where else
Yeah,
can you? Okay.
yeah. Best kept secret is on Vimeo on demand. Iconic. The best way to
Okay.
find it is to go to seanstone.info, and that's my
Okay.
website.
So what inspired, I mean, I know you've done other work prior to that, media work, and been researching the occult a lot, and just been a really interesting kind of, if dare I call you, conspiracy researcher.
Mhm.
What inspired you to start doing this kind of research and bringing these kinds of things to light?
I mean, I've always looked at my processes, um, creative endeavors in particular, as just sort of adventures within consciousness. What is my consciousness interested by? And I've been a curious being, and I think I fostered the curiosity where a lot of people have um, sort of put up blocks. Let's say over what they allow themselves to take in. They put up the filter. They basically confine themselves within the box. That's why I've always been called the outside the box thinker. Um, and there are literally puzzles that you can do just to see how people literally confine themselves within boxes when they're trying to connect dots. And we are here to recognize that those boundaries are man-made conceptions for the most part. There are natural processes, and there are things that nature does and whatnot. But the idea that we have all these human constructs. So, in fact, like the last documentary I did was called Metahuman, and it was with interviewing Deepak Chopra was a major aspect of it. And Deepak really clarified it well for me, and just saying, look, all these things that we're dealing with, interfacing with, are man-made constructs of the idea of what it is. Because how we see the world is basically taught to us. It's very rare to actually stick with that childlike, imaginative, almost more of a dream time approach, which is how do you say, to reconsider and reconstruct and look at things differently. It's, how would I put it? If I was looking at someone's face, the fact is that I'm constructing their face literally by how I'm looking at it. And that's why when we look at each other, it's like some people look into the eyes, some people focus on some feature, whether it's like the forehead, the eyebrows, the lips, whatever it is. But literally, you could go to the microscopic level. You could go to a much bigger level and just get a sense, almost like the painters, like the impressionist painters would do, of the wave function, because really we're vibrating electrons and around protons, electrons around these atoms, right? And uh, and we're moving, and we're sort of wave like beings, and waves of energy. So it's very interesting how we construct this image of someone in our brain, and that's just a physical image. Now imagine how we construct the idea of someone, and how someone says your father or your mother, and how immediately it's going to generate an impression in the brain that's not necessarily in the moment. It's not necessarily true in this moment. It's an impression that's left there.
Mm.
So perhaps it's a pleasant memory or it's a dark memory, but these are all impressions that we are literally projecting into this reality and saying that's the truth. No, it's not the truth. It's our subjective interpretation. So I say this because my mind has always been very curious. I've always wanted to explore, what is the nature of reality? How does consciousness work? How is this experience of reality subjective, in the sense of, it's always my experience that I have to acknowledge is going to be different from your experience, is going to be different from every other being's experience, because we can never look at the same thing the same way, you know. in alignment. Let's say we can have resonance, we can have agreement, but we'll never look at something the exact same way. So this is sort of a long-winded response to how I got interested in these subjects, because it's just my interest has always been vast. I've always been interested by many different subjects, and that's what led me to conversations and interviews and topics that are pretty, how do you say, broad.
Okay. Now I know your father's Oliver Stone and you grew up around filmmaking, I'm sure. Did that kind of inspire you a little too? Because it's like, is filmmaking truth? I think a lot of people do think it is because they get so caught up in it. And like, where's the line between watching a film and being in supposed reality? Does that make sense?
There's no difference, because this is the argument, this is a philosophical argument that people have been grappling with in terms of you know what is reality, because we always have to, again, going back to the idea, this is a human based reality that we're experiencing. We're not experiencing the reality of a bat, we're not experiencing the reality of an ant, we're experiencing a human based reality. Our human based reality is based in our psycho-spiritual apparatus that, as I said, my reality that I'm operating with. So if I have a dream and I wake up from that dream screaming or in bliss or in thought, provoked, that's real. My feelings, my interaction, my feelings, my emotional state is real. You see, it doesn't matter that it was a dream, because it has a physical impact upon me, or it has a lasting impression on me. The same with anything that I take in, whether it's so-called real or not, it's real to me. So this is an important thing as far as why media has been so important throughout history, not just in the 20th century when they started projecting these fires onto screens in a ritualistic way, with setting ambiance and light, low lighting, and creating almost a religious experience around these screens, right? Films. Media has been important throughout history, because it's the nature of how we convey language, how we learn, secret societies and occult knowledge, hidden knowledge has gone back to the very dawn of writing. Who has access to what's in the hieroglyphs in Egypt? There are many different ways of interpreting those symbols. The creation of letters, right? The power of letters and lettering, and the spell casting, spelling, right? And how we are then basically given the opportunity to create our own spells by writing, which can then create what? You can write scripts, you can write books, you can inspire others to then have their imaginings and have their own engagement with the realities that you're creating. So it's all magic. And that's what's so interesting, is when you grow up around it, you realize the magical nature of reality. And that's hopefully what I'm here to help others to understand and recognize, that they also are engaged with it, and they have the ability to recreate their own reality if they take hold of it, realizing, as I said in the beginning, it's always your own individual reality.
Yeah, and you said something, and sorry, the best kept secret. I said the biggest secret before.
That's a David Icke book, I think. The Biggest Secret.
You're right. Oh, I'm outed as a David Icke freak, because I am. You said directors, like a magician, decide what we see and where the frame ends. And I was like, oh my God, that's why I asked that question, because it's like, it's not only about a film, it's reality. I mean, you see it now, everything's being censored, only certain things can be heard, seen, listened to, consumed. It really is. It's kind of like the Truman Show.
constructs. So yes, the director, I know I appreciated this when I made my first documentary, and it was my opportunity to direct my first documentaries on the behind the scenes of Alexander. And I made a film called Fight Against Time, about my father's journey and what a director goes through, and how you go through this idea phase of, like, he thought of Alexander when he was a kid, and he was reading about him, and he had this imagination of, like, he had the imagined version of Alexander the Great. And then, throughout time, it came back to him at different phases, and he hinted at it in The Doors, where it's like they show the Alexander the Great bust against Jim Morrison's face, and who plays Jim Morrison? Val Kilmer. And then 15 years later, Val Kilmer comes to play the father of the young Colin Farrell, who is Alexander in this movie. And again, it's reinterpretations of what is real. Who knows? Who's alive that knows what's real about Alexander the Great? No one alive knows exactly what the truth of Alexander the Great's life was. So it's an interpretation, and it's a shared imagining. It's what how do you say? It's about tapping into a certain strain of the collective unconsciousness and sharing it, with others to see, what resonates with them. Are they in resonance with this story and these themes? And again, it's such a fascinating process to watch something created from literally from nothing. And this is how cities have been built. This is how, you name it, technologies, our interaction right here. It's like some vision, some idea that gets spawned and offered into the world and brings people together, right, for some period of time. And ultimately, then we transition into some new phase because, war and pestilence and excess ultimately create some kind of downfall. And who knows, I don't know if we'll end up with that same level of collapse that we saw historically, in the sense that I don't know that America will collapse the way that Rome collapsed necessarily, but there are these tides of energy, right, that gather, and energy comes together. And now it's like it comes together in these cities, but then we're also seeing, well, the transformation of the cities before our eyes, as you talked about. What is reality? Well, people are being in cities, they're being forced to walk around with masks and have vaccine cards and identify as such to enter places. And then it's just a matter of time before you can imagine the merging of the human with the machine, which is an agenda that we talk about in the docuseries. It's been talked about by the so-called elite, the advanced thinkers and whatnot for decades. Transhumanism and this idea of merging humans with chips and robotics and artificial intelligence programs. I mean, already the Neuralink that Elon Musk is doing is already the first step in that direction. Not the first, let's say, but that's a major landmark. If he can actually get people to communicate with technology through telepathy or an EMF frequency, right, and actually control technology with their minds, this is a huge leap in that direction. So yeah, we are seeing, how do you say, we are seeing a major transition in the modality of what it is to be human. But this is not a new phenomenon. We've been seeing transitions in the way it is to be human when humans first gathered in cities, or first created alphabets, and created, again, spells to sort of keep people disciplined according to laws, legal structures that are often, if not always, tied to banking systems, basically getting people to pay their taxes or to pay the bank.
Yeah. And I also feel like filmmaking is so instrumental in desensitizing us to these kinds of things, because what's going on now, people will say, God, it's like being in a dystopic movie, because it's just like a lot of these movies I haven't even seen, but they'll be like, it's just like this movie, watch this movie, watch this movie. That's what's going on right now. Or, V for Vendetta, or whatever the case, and with the machines and man, my God, we have so many movies that play with that idea and kind of incept these ideas into our mind. We don't think it's going to happen, but we're just like, wow, that'd be kind of cool if it did, because of the way it's pushed. But another thing I wanted to get into, I think that's an interesting way to segue, is just like the inversion of everything right now. Mm-hmm. So like, people who are supposed to protect our health are not doing that. Politicians who are supposed to represent the people are not doing that. Intelligence agencies who are supposed to get to the bottom of all these things that are going on, drugs and border, and they're doing quite the opposite. But they're telling us that it's for your protection. We're doing it for you. It's all about you. It's all about the older people. It's all about the kids.
Yeah.
And it's just so hard I think so many people, I don't feel for myself, but for most people, they're still kind of locked in that modality of, the learned perception of reality, which is like, oh yes, that's what they do, so that's what they must be doing, not questioning, not going beyond just the sheer surface of things.
Well, that's, this is why, to me, it's a very profound profound time, because it really is sort of real test. This is a major test to see who has some semblance of individual conscious awareness. And at a deeper level, a lot of this is already, I believe it's already, I don't want to script it. I want to say like it's already chosen. Like souls have already chosen their path. People have already chosen where they want to end up. And to basically consent at this point to a complete inversion of reality and not see it as an inversion, to me, it's basically surrendering your individual ability to think critically and have an individual spirit. So it to me, it's not a very big step from that place of conform, consent, and censor to take the chip and basically allow yourself to be increasingly remotely controlled.
Yeah, because you hear Elon Musk and his Neuralink excuses, I'm trying to intercept this plan to hook up humans. It's like, well, how are you doing that? Like, I'm preemptively trying to
You can't.
prevent this from happening by making it happen.
Well,
Like,
I'll
I
tell you
don't
how you do
understand
it.
that.
I'll tell you how that works. I think that there's a point that you cannot, in consciousness, you cannot negate some. How do you say? You cannot negate something once it's in existence, or once the idea is there. It has to run its course, right? So you can't abort it. Let's say you can't abort the idea. You can't just say, "Listen, we're not going to do this." No, the human experience is about experimentation, and so there is an inevitability to this evolution of the artificial, design of, let's say, manipulating, whether it's designer humans, these sort of gene splicing technologies, whether it's the development of robots and increasingly artificial intelligence, the merging of humans with machines. There's a certain level of inevitability to it. So if you're Musk and you take him at his word, he has been someone that's against mandates, that's been against lockdowns, that has been sort of saying people should have the right to choose when it comes to, for example, the vaccine and other things. So if you're going to stand with that principle, then you say, yeah, ultimately it should be a free will choice. And for those that who are, for example, like wanting to connect themselves to machinery and have sort of Neuralinks and things like this, they should have the right to choose that technology. I can't sit here and say it's any worse than the dangers that have already been unlocked by people with social media and smartphone technologies. I mean, literally, you have changed the brain patterning of humans. Kids literally at 6 months old have screens in front of their faces. That's very dangerous and very damaging if you look at it from the perspective that, is it EMF? Do we know is dangerous? Yes, EMF can be harmful, especially when you're interfacing with it constantly. If we need to figure out these things. We need to figure out ways of creating safer modalities for the radiation from electromagnetics and our interface with these things. But the point is that where they're going next with it, it's like there should be a choice. My opposition to these things is when you don't give people choice, when you basically force it upon them, when you say you must do this, you must consent. Like the left is trying to sell is the idea that you have to get a jab to work. And then I was like listening to Shaq recently talking to this lady at CBS. Yeah. She's like, it's a choice. It's like, is that a choice? It's force. You're saying you can't work unless you're jabbed. And it's like, no, that's not force. He's like, that's exactly what force is. It's just you're trying to redefine force. Like you're trying to redefine everything else because they're playing language games. So the left has been playing language games. Change the definition of vaccine. Change the nature of force. Change the definition of what is lawful by saying, well, it's a mandate. It's it's been given by us. We are the deciders of what's good for society. It's like you've taken away the ability to critically think from people by redefining things and reshaping things in such a way that they're not recognizing that it's just wordplay. And yeah, I mean it's again, it's like, well, it's still your free choice because you don't want to, you don't have to work. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, technically it's like you don't have to work. Okay, great. That's really that's a very legalistic approach to the fact that you're forcing someone to do something if they want to be, if they want to be gainfully employed, or engaging with others. It's insane.
Yeah, but also, I mean, yeah, choice, but you also have to have informed consent, and they're not giving us that. That's what's really like they're withholding.
Well, they're
So
not
like,
giving
oh,
you
we
any
don't want to
consent.
release anything
Not
about
even.
this vaccine for 50 years.
Well,
Oh, you
yeah.
look at the insert, it's blank. But
Right.
it's even if they gave us a choice at this point,
Yeah.
our hands are tied because we're not consenting on all levels because we don't understand most of what's going, like what it's all about. It's just, a
It's
tagline
Kafka.
like this will
It's
save you. This
it
will,
it
this is
it,
the solution.
it's Kafka. It's very Kafkaesque. It's like, you're being like, basically it's like, what am I being arrested for? Well, you're not allowed to know. What am I being,
Yeah.
what am I being given? You're not allowed to know. Okay, well, do I have a choice? No, you have no choice. So I have to take it. You don't have to take it, but you said there's no choice. Well, there's no choice if you want to be a part of society.
Yeah,
It's like it's
exactly.
just absurdity, basically.
And understanding I know you are very well versed in the occult and a lot of these institutions. I'm wondering, is that just another extension of that? Because it's like hoarding information, it's not telling us the nature of reality, just teaching us certain things that'll allow us to be locked into certain perceptual, modalities. So we see things a certain way en masse.
Mhm.
What would you say about that?
Well, that's what the media has been doing for decades. They've been selling,
But now it's
since
life
the
or
dawn. They've
death,
been selling
though.
it. Well,
Like this, the stakes are higher this time, in my opinion, because it's everywhere. This is global.
it's more
Yeah.
of the New World Order phenomenon. The New World Order phenomenon was global. Basically, was the desire for global government. Normal, like a normalization or unification of legal structures and financial structures around sort of again, like these worlds, these world governing bodies, and separated, basically making it the constitutional principles of the United States, especially the Bill of Rights, promises the American people to have the rights that they don't give to the government. They're trying to invert it so that essentially the federal government has taken more and more rights away from the people, and then with using civil codes and you name it. I mean, this excess of law that ultimately is the very nature of fascism. I mean, to have like a total, to usurp people's human rights and under the guise of legal structures and codes. And then they want to give it even further away from, I think, even beyond the federal level, ultimately to these, bodies that are outside of any jurisdiction. The CDC says, or the World Health Organization says this or mandates this, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, this is
Unelected
about,
people.
exactly, this is not about unelected officials. This is about us as humans deciding what we choose to do and how we choose to gather and govern ourselves. So that's why it's interesting to see it, like it's getting more and more global. At the same time, you're seeing more and more of states' rights being activated, and like individual states and individual counties basically saying, no, we're not, we're going to resist. And you see the protests that happen, and the various boards that are having hearings. It's really interesting to see this process of people becoming more activated and awakened politically, and choosing really consciously where they want to live and abide, given the circumstances and terms by which they have to do business. So in my county, it's like, I don't see anyone really wearing masks unless some businesses force them to, which is always that kind of strange thing where it's like, how can they just get away with this for so long, for 2 years now,
Same. I see it
knowing
here
that,
too.
knowing the fraudulence of the masks, knowing that
Yeah.
you're breathing your own bacteria in, which is much less healthy than nailing a few
Yeah.
germs from others. It's
Yeah.
like, it's just disgusting what they're doing to people, and the fact that they've gotten away with it for 2 years under the premise that there's always another germ out there, so it can go on indefinitely.
Exactly. And I'm sure you've heard of the problem reaction solution thing. I mean, I think we're being hit with that so hard too. Like I feel, it's just an opinion, but that a lot of the events that happen in the news in the world are orchestrated so they can come in and say, well, we need to, that's a whole nother rabbit hole that I know you don't have time to go down, but I'm saying, look, something got blown up. We have to protect you. Now we have
Sure.
to know all your information. We have to do all, and it's the same thing with COVID,
Hmm.
it keeps happening. Yeah. I feel like we're not, we're not like, wait a second. This feels familiar, that the
I
whole
think
cycle is just constantly able to be
a lot more
reenacted.
people, I feel like a lot more people are savvy to it. So I'm pleasantly surprised by the fact that we've got this level of awareness. I guess you could say I'm I'm pleasantly surprised by that. I'm also shocked that more people don't get it at this point, because that just indicates to me that there's no hope
Yeah,
for them.
I'm on the same exact.
Um,
Yeah.
but overall, I'm pleasantly surprised to see the resistance and such a split in the country, and a general feeling that yes, there you can fool some of the people. Was it you can fool some of the people most of the time? You can feel some. Was it you can fool?
Some of the time, but you can't film all the time, I
Yeah,
think, or something
exactly. You
like
can
that.
fool most of the people. Most of the people some of the time. Some of the people
Yeah.
most of the time. But you can't fool all the people all the time. And that's what I think is really happening now. It's like the more that these inversions go on, it's like you end up with two civilizations. You end up with those that actually like see it's a totally absurd thing where the government, the Biden administration can spend $30 million giving out crack pipes, but ivermectin is banned. And and then you've
It's
got
insane.
and then you've got the side that's just like, exactly, they're like, that's just normal, that's great. I love crack pipes. We should definitely be handing them out because
Yeah.
that's what we need to do as a society with our tax money.
Yeah,
There you go.
it's crazy. And then one other thing that's a little bit off topic, but it's happening, and it's part of, I feel like it's part of why the borders are open, and it's a big part of a lot of the work that I've seen that you've done, is human trafficking. Now, what I want to ask you about that is, every time I bring this up to people, it's so it's troubling to me because they don't even want to talk about it
No.
because it makes them feel so uncomfortable. But I'm like, well, how do you think the people who are actually being victimized by this must feel? And so I feel like we're becoming a society where if it's uncomfortable for us, even though it has nothing to do with our personal experience, but it's so important, it needs to be, exposed, it needs to be discussed. I feel like that's the biggest reason why this particular trade, or this horrific thing that keeps happening, is still happening, because people just don't even want to, like, I can't, I
Hmm.
know, like, kids, oh, like, what, as you've obviously interviewed a lot of people and you've gone down that rabbit hole. Do you see that too, or do you see like maybe this will usher in a different consciousness where people will be more, at least more open to acknowledging this is happening and it needs to stop?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I haven't really focused my energy and attention in terms of like how to combat it, because again, you're talking about an overall consciousness shift that requires an increasing awareness of people's own trauma. So it's almost like the inner work and the sort of the realization that we have to do our shadow work is so important, internal shadow work, because the trauma that we carry is perpetrated on others. And so there is like this global dark side, but I mean, the question is like, who isn't traumatized in this world? Like, that's what we need to figure out, are like the people that are actually moving forward because they've worked through the trauma, they've become more conscious beings, and these are the examples that we really need guiding and leading us forward. The trauma process is like, when I talk about that, it's because most kids are abused in some capacity. And I was talking about this on a show with Scott Bennett just recently, and it's like, you know, you're basically putting kids in these institutions, and like, whether it's being masked all day in school now, but just in general, the institutional setting of a school system is like, it's traumatizing. It's designed on grading, conforming,
Mm.
Be quiet, listen to the teacher, you know, don't use your imagination, learn how to regurgitate, conform to others. Most of these school systems are horrible. How many people have been traumatized by it? Oh, you don't fit into the cool kids, you're an outsider, you're ostracized, you're bullied. This is traumatizing, and this is just from other kids, but at their own parents. How many parents yell at their kids, slap their kids, sexually abuse their kids? I mean, so it's like, we can talk about human trafficking, but how do humans actually treat their own children? How do they actually see the children? Do they actually look at the children as, wow, you guys are the leaders of the future, we need to honor you and treat you as, as these beautiful, like the beings that are connected, that are actually closer to source than I am, closer to divinity than I am. Let's honor you, let's learn from you. You see, so there's a whole process that has to go, the whole shift in consciousness that has to go on here. And I mean, yeah, human slavery and trafficking, it's like, that's an extreme, but we see it every day, the abuse, and it's normalized. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think our entire power structure is
Yeah.
predicated on that. You cannot gain a tremendous amount of wealth, power without causing suffering. I mean, and not saying I
That's where
believe
I
it has to
disagree.
be that way.
Well, that's
I
where I
don't think it
disagree.
has to be that way, but I feel
I
like
don't
that's
think
how
you,
it's set up.
and I think that's the old modality. And that's why we have to shift our awareness and our
Exactly.
intentionality to saying, no, we don't, money doesn't have to be based in sin and blood money
I
and
agree.
debt and suffering. Money is just
I
energy.
agree.
Can we shift our energy to create, again, to build out futures where it's like, no, we can be wealthy and have all our needs and wants provided for, unless our wants involve, the suffering of others. But let's say, like, we have our needs and wants provided for, and be doing, healthy work and contributing and sharing in each other's energy and moving into like a better future. I think that's possible. And I think there's a lot of examples of people who have made money that are healthy beings. But for the most part, the ones that you're seeing, yes, the ones on, the ones that you see on TV and whatnot, these people are control freaks. Yeah, a lot of
Yes.
sociopathic, narcissistic. Sure,
And
even
they're
those
pulling the
other stars.
strings. I mean,
Well, yes,
for
to
what's going on right now, it's
yes,
just,
yes. There's
because
probably a small group of people that is ultimately like the biggest purveyors of this corrupt system, and at the same time, have we collectively allowed it? Yes,
yeah,
but it's
because
now we're
I don't think
waking.
we've known anything else, at least not in this lifetime. It's not, I don't feel like it's in the forefront of our minds that this is actually the reality of the power structure. It's just it's just like it's just like anything else. You just walk out and you're like, oh yeah, of course. Well, you have to have a sweatshop to have this, or you have to have cruel, intensive industrial farming to make a lot of food. You have to spray pesticides all over everything to get a lot of, I'm not saying I agree with that, but we're just indoctrinated into
Yeah,
this way of thinking and people don't even register it. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. But in closing, like, how do you see the shift in consciousness transpiring? Like, based on what all is going on now, I feel like people are waking up, and then there are some people who are, forget it, they'll never wake up.
that's right.
But I do feel like something's changing very
Yeah.
dramatically, and you can see because they just keep tightening the vice. If you're confident, you can kind of sit back a little bit, but now everything's starting to close in a lot more because they realize, and I feel like that's why this whole thing was launched. It was
Yeah.
starting to always marinate that awakening. How do you see that playing out?
I feel like those that have consented essentially will never free themselves. Those that are, awakening are already on the path of freedom and a new reality. And then there's those that are sort of like in between somewhere. And who knows? That'll be interesting to see what they end up doing. But
Yeah.
there's a prophecy about a third waking up into a better reality, a third essentially dying off, let's say, or losing their souls, and a third going mad. So let's see what
I'm
happens.
somewhere in between that right now because I still can't believe we're still doing this after 2 years. I'm like, okay, like I didn't see this
But
happening,
do you
but
do it where you are? And where I am, I don't feel it.
I see it. Yeah, we have a lot of snowbirds here right now, and
Oh yeah,
it's funny. I don't own a TV and I don't watch mainstream media by choice because I just, hey, it might be good to know, but I don't want to know.
it's
But
not
it's
worth
funny when
knowing.
I go out, that's my barometer. I
Yeah,
go out and all of a sudden, no mask for a long time. Then
yeah.
all of a sudden, everybody, not everybody, but lots of masks. So I'll go to my friends who have TVs and I'll go, so what's going on? New variant? Yeah, Omicron. And I'm like, I knew it because I can feel it. I can see it out in the world. And it's frustrating because it's like, if you just turned off your TV and went outside, would you feel any different than any other day? I mean, besides masks, but I mean, like, are there people dying in the streets or, are
No,
there
the
ambulance
the homeless
everywhere?
population is like, has expanded across California. So there you go,
Oh,
right?
I moved from California. Funny enough that you say that, but yeah, and it's just like it's so interesting to see how hypnotized, like, okay, everything's like you're having the exact same experience. The only difference is you're being told to act differently at a certain point, and you're doing it,
Yeah.
and you're like, all right, Omicron, and but prior to that, everything looked exactly the same. So I'm really having a hard time understanding why this is happening. Like I want to know, like, what's going on in your mind. I'm not trying to be, well, sometimes I am, but this time I'll be nice. I'm not trying to be condescending, but I'm just like, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? Because 90% of the people don't have masks on. Yet
Yeah.
these people look so frightened. They're like, and they have their kids doing it. And it's just it's like we're living in two totally different realities, but we're under the same roof and we're in such close proximity to each other.
Yeah.
So maybe that's kind of what you were getting at, where people are just going to go. I don't know how that's going to marry itself, though, because we have people who are just like either you're in or you're out. You're with us or you're against us.
Yeah.
And they seem to be in charge right now. So I'm like, how's
Eh,
this all going to play out?
yeah. I don't think they're in charge.
I don't either, but there's a lot of folks that do,
But it's
so
it's like Simon says, if you want to play that game, they're in charge. If you don't want to play that game, you're in charge.
oh yeah, I'm in charge.
There
But
you go.
I'm just worried. I'm like, hey, I could have all the consciousness in the world, but if I'm outnumbered by millions of people, I don't know where that ultimately lands. So we'll see. But I and I hope that
You're not
they
outnumbered. Don't worry, you're not outnumbered.
well, I guess yeah. I think that middle ground that you talked about are people who just want to get on with their life, so they comply, but they don't
Right.
believe in it. They're like, all right, what? I just give me the mask. I need to get on this plane.
Right.
And those are the people that actually are the ones that I'm like, so if you just stopped, we would this would have been over like a year, 2 years ago. This would have been over because we have the numbers. Doesn't matter how spiritually conscious, but we have the numbers. If one day millions of people said, I'm not flying because unless you drop this mask thing, I'm not
That'd be
flying
amazing.
anymore. It would be
That'd be
shut
amazing.
it would be shut down. But
That'd be
it's like
amazing.
you talk to people and they're like, but I have a flight and I need to, and it's like, but it's just one day of
Yeah.
perceived suffering because I don't see that as suffering. You just
I think we should have optional flights. Masked, unmasked. Do you want to fly with the unmasked? Yeah.
yeah, and how is your being vaccinated or me not? How does that factor? I don't understand. Like it's like you have to wear sunblock because I have sunblock on, but if you
Yeah.
don't wear it too, I'm going to get
Don't
burned.
try to understand the logic. Remember, it's a
Yeah.
game. It's a game.
Yeah.
The rules of the game are made by those who constructed the game. And if you want to play that game, it's time to step out, to step away. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm getting there. I'm getting there, Sean.
Yeah. Good. Good.
Well, I really want to thank you so much. What are you working on now? Where can people find you?
Yeah, people find seanstone.info is a good place. My website. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Telegram and all that stuff. So yeah, I think the best is just or BitChute, Rumble, those channels. But no, I mean, I don't really talk about what's upcoming. I'll just, I think seanstone.info is a great place to find all my work and maybe some sign up to my subscribe to my newsletter. That way they can always check out anything that I release.
Awesome. And you do some spiritual work, right? Like people
Hmm.
can.
Yeah, I do private consults and my Patreon. I have like some meditations and I have new interviews that I release there. So Patreon's a good place to find me.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat and
it's a
to give me
pleasure.
all your perspectives. I love your work and I'll
Thank you.
definitely stay on top of that website to see what's coming next and maybe we
Cool.
can speak again.
Awesome. I appreciate that. We
Thank
could do that.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Have a good
much.
night, Sean. Bye.
You too. Bye.